You can compare all the useless statistics you want to. Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL. We got all that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL. It is Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on your favorite social media, and myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola. On today's episode of Locked On NFL, I'm going to tell you why you don't need to compare irrelevant stats to come to conclusions. We're also going to look at who the next wide receiver to be extended might be, but we're going to kick everything off today with Justin Jefferson. He gets the bag. He's paid like the best wide receiver in the NFL because he is. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can head over to FanDuel right now to make every moment more. New customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets by winning any $5 bet. You can head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Luke, listen, you cover him. You know him. You've watched him play. Justin Jefferson gets his contract extension, 4 years, $140 million, highest non-paid quarterback in the league. He is paid like the best offensive player, defensive player that's not a quarterback in the NFL, paid like the best wide receiver in the NFL because he simply is the best wide receiver in the NFL. What is it that makes Justin Jefferson so special?
Yeah, he's paid in guarantees. This is the important distinction.
Right. Good. Yes.
In
good point.
Full guarantees, guarantees at signing. Nick Bosa held the record until today for most guaranteed at signing ever for a non-QB at, I think, $88 million. And now I think Jefferson's making like 88.2. This is very clearly designed.
Just ticked him over.
That's what he wanted. That's what his camp wanted. That's what they get out of this deal, right? So best non-QB, highest paid non-QB in history. That's offensive player of the year. Guess who won that a couple of years ago? And there's also
1800 yard receiving season.
Yeah, we were talking of a 2K season
for him, maybe. Yeah.
And honestly had every chance in the world to be on that same pace last year until he hurt his hammy. But there's also like the analytical case, which is rooted in like WAR or EPA added or whatever. And it's of course difficult to like separate that from surroundings and all that. But the best shots we've got have shown him in as the number one the most valuable non-QB in the league. Like that is a statistically backed argument as well. If you want to look at like AV, like cumulative, like AV and stuff like that. So kind of no matter which angle you look at it, I mean, wide receiver, it's always going to be a wide receiver is probably going to be the most valuable non-QB in the league, unless you want to talk about like edges or tackles, which I am open to. Love the trenches. But what makes him as good as he is such an artist with his routes. I remember going to camp and just sitting there watching all the other receivers run routes. You got good players in the end. KJ Osborne, he's a solid player. Jordan Addison, who was like had just shown up, and we were like, oh wow, he's really good. Even somebody like Brandon Powell, who is definitely a depth player, but a solid route runner who knows what he's doing. And then Jefferson would run the route, and he has got like 30 different little razzle dazzles on it, a little bit of wiggle at the top of it. He stems it differently, and it all has a purpose. That's what's cool about covering Justin Jefferson is you watch a route where he really gets the better of somebody. You see all these different changes from the way it looks on the whiteboard, where it's you go up and you turn left at 15 yards. He has got so many, the way he releases, the way his releases work into each other. He'll release outside, 3 times in a row before then waiting for the right moment to subvert that. Everything is art. I've described him as a guy that changes the way I think about what it means to run a good route. Because it's not just about crispness. It's not just about speed or athleticism. He has all of that. It's about like he turns a route running from a science into an art. That's so cool. And it not to mention the contested catchability and all that. There is, I think with receivers, and you're going to love this because this is what Chris Olave had coming out. And this is why people had Chris Olave number one, versatility all around. When you're a receiver, if you are a one-trick pony, right? If you're John Ross, who's, by the way, trying to make a go of it in the league again, for him. But if you're John Ross, you're just fast, you ain't getting anywhere. If you are not necessarily that fast, but you can run a decent route, you can get separation, you can, your hands are reliable enough, you don't have a drops issue, like a lack of flaws is in and of itself a strength. And I remember the guy that really taught me that lesson, you're going to love this too, was Michael Thomas.
When I was just for that.
Lack of flaws is in and of itself a strength with receivers. And Jefferson not only has that, but he has this ability to just see it differently than everybody else, see it differently than the DB sees it, and create something that's so much more than what it ever started out as. It's so cool. Watching him makes football better. I'm so glad that he gets to be on my favorite team forever.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Hopefully he gets to finish his career over in Minnesota as well. He's one step closer to that conversation. And I want to go back to the Michael Thomas point that you made, because I remember watching Michael Thomas was the person that defined route running for me and like how special you can be as a route runner. Obviously we watched, we watched back the days of Jerry Rice and all those other things, but the route running game has changed based on how, defenses play nowadays, what you're allowed to do, all these other things. But the thing that I loved watching about Michael Thomas was when he was at the top of his game here in New Orleans, he was setting things up for the fourth quarter that he was going to do in the fourth quarter with what he was doing in the first quarter. And that's what I see from Justin Jefferson, right? Like, let me create these tendencies so that I can break these tendencies later. Let me see how you respond to them so that I can take advantage of that later on. I completely agree there. And I think, hey, having a near 70% catch percentage can't hurt either, right? Like, you've got to be able to catch the dang ball. Doesn't matter how well you can run, well you can run
and
the
catch
route.
It in difficult spots and huge spots too. I'm sure there's some highlights popping in your mind right now.
Yep, erase inaccuracy. Don't talk about that one. All these other things, like there was the London catch, of course, between the Vikings and the Saints.
Oh, I was thinking of the Buffalo
close
one,
and personal. Yeah, that one. Too.
Oh yeah, the step over Marshawn Lattimore. The Saints, one of the only teams that whole year with the cojones to leave their star corner actually with no safety help on Justin Jefferson. And they got spanked on a go ball at the end of the game.
I was just say for better or for worse, Burn Ward. But it all would have been fine otherwise. No, but I mean, like, these are the things to me that like separate Justin Jefferson from everybody else. But then, also he does have the top end speed. Do you remember? I'm sure you remember. I know you remember when he was coming into the NFL, there was all the conversation about how he was only going to be able to be a slot cornerback in the NFL because that's
another
where he took
valuable
most of
lesson.
his snaps.
Another valuable lesson of the draft, because I fell for that too. And I still liked him because I was like, well, I don't necessarily know that he can't play outside. I just know that he didn't in his last year because Ja'Marr Chase was there and LSU was like cooking something, like they were doing something. But I think that's exactly the lesson, is like, evaluate somebody on what they do, not on what they didn't happen to do, because sometimes you're just in a college offense that needs you for this. And college offenses aren't trying to showcase the player for the draft. They're trying to win football games with everything they have around you. So you have to take in that context. And if you didn't, and you didn't like Jefferson because you thought he was just a slot, I hope that's like the lesson that you could have learned. That's the reason that I didn't consider him as a better prospect than, say, Henry Ruggs or Jerry Jeudy, which is now like egregiously wrong in hindsight.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. Couple numbers that I'll throw out real quick. Four straight 1,000-yard seasons so far for Justin Jefferson. That includes a season last year where he only appeared in 10 games due to injury. Averages just under 1,500 receiving yards over the course of those 4 years, and almost 8 touchdowns, 7.5 touchdowns over those 4 years as well. And again, that includes a 10-game season last year. Cannot wait to see Justin Jefferson back out on the field. So we've made our case for Justin Jefferson as the best wide receiver in the NFL. There are other wideouts in that conversation. Let's take a look at guys like Tyreek Hill, Ja'Marr Chase, and CeeDee Lamb, who could be up for the next big contract here in the NFL. We got that coming up for you here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by Gametime. It's the best place to find last-minute tickets. If you are perhaps in the Dallas or Boston area, you're trying to get NBA Finals tickets, check it out on Gametime. Or if you are trying to plan ahead for some NFL journeys this year, your team's home opener or whatever, find it on Gametime. Gametime's a great place to find this stuff, especially if it's last minute. You can save up to 60% buying last minute because at a certain point, people are just trying to get rid of their tickets when it's the day of the event, even an hour into the event. You can get that. So if you're just a bad planner or if you're trying to get savings by gaming the system a little bit, Gametime is there for you. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. That's the Gametime app and code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Yes, Justin Jefferson is, we think, undeniably the best wide receiver in the NFL, but there are some guys that are in contention for that title and could be seeing their own contract extensions here soon. So let's take a look at who could be the next wide receiver to get the bag. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check in on Locked On Sports today, our 24/7 stream over there, the first national sports 24/7 stream on YouTube. You can find it every day for free. If you're tired of listening to those other networks just yell and scream at each other, head over to Locked On Sports today, make the switch, come and check out all the biggest stories covered by the people that know the teams the best and without all the yelling and screaming. You can find that again over on YouTube at Locked On Sports today and on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins, Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals, and CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys are among the class of wide receivers that are widely expected to get the next contract extension. Luke, if you had all three of these players, or if you were the agent of all three of these players, who do you think you'd be able to get the extension first done for out of those three players? Who would you be looking to get that done first for?
I should mention that I think it was Ian Rappaport has reported that T. Higgins and Chase and Lamb we're all waiting on Justin Jefferson to get their deal signed. So now they're ready and willing to enter the negotiation.
Yeah. I should throw T. Higgins in there too. I don't think he'll challenge as the highest paid guy, but obviously
he might be
getting
next.
Justin Jefferson's number helps.
But I don't think it's going to be a Bengal. The Bengals have had pretty famous cash flow issues with getting this stuff done. That complicates things. It doesn't disqualify it from getting done, but it may slow things down. I would go with CeeDee Lamb. Tyreek Hill is still in the, like, there are reasons for the Dolphins to kind of look Tyreek Hill in the eye and say no, even though he can call and ask all he wants for more money. There's not a lot of leverage there. Because he has 2 years left on his contract.
Couple years left on his deal, yeah. And when he showed up in Miami, he was the highest paid wide receiver when he got there.
Yeah,
right? Or not when
as
he got
part
there,
of that
but
deal.
after he ended up there, as a part of that whole deal.
So this will influence Tyreek Hill's next deal, but there's not really a way for him to force it to be done this year, unless he wants to start holding out over this and really go nuclear with it. CeeDee Lamb, both sides want that deal done. Like they're going to work together to get that deal done and make sure everybody is happy there. So that just feels like, as opposed to the other two situations, it feels like the one where everything is like oiled up and ready to go. With Cincinnati, I'm sure they want to get things done with Ja'Marr Chase, but again, Cincinnati can afford to wait a year if they want to, or Ja'Marr Chase can do what Justin Jefferson did and say, I think I get more money next year. Let's come back to this. Like nothing's stopping Ja'Marr Chase from doing that. But with Lamb, now is the time. So I do see it getting done with CeeDee Lamb in the next, I don't know, maybe even like the next week. I see it getting done soon, and I see him maybe not necessarily getting higher than Justin Jefferson, but using Justin Jefferson's contract as a framework, and then seeing how he can make it team friendly, help his team win as well.
Yeah, I completely understand that line of thinking when it comes to CeeDee Lamb. Getting that done before the mandatory mini camps helps a lot too. Gets rid of some of the potential drama that can show up with that. It's easier during OTAs to be like, they're voluntary, they're voluntary. It's harder to argue the idea of like the mandatory mini camp and not showing up for that and all those other things. It can be done. Don't get me wrong. I think you're going to see a lot of veterans that probably aren't going to show up for mandatory mini camps, or at least are going to, what's the new phrase now? Not hold out, but hold in.
Hold in, right?
Present,
yeah,
present, not participating.
I like hold
kind
ins.
Of I'm down for all that.
You're with your teammates. You're still at practice. You're soaking stuff in. And you're just making a point, and you're just trying not to get injured before you get a contract. I think that's perfectly.
That's 100% it. Yep, I'm always down for the hold-in situation. Let me make the case for T. Higgins to be the next wide receiver to be extended. Probably because it's the easiest of the contracts, right? Like, I know the Cincinnati Bengals have had their cash flow problems. There's no doubt about that. They've already seen T. Higgins, upset this offseason. They've already seen Trey Hendrickson request, a trade. Neither of those, I don't imagine either of those guys are going to end up anywhere but in Cincinnati in 2024. But I think that the T. Higgins one maybe gets a little bit easier just because you're not looking at a guy that could potentially be looking to reset the market. The thing that does make it tricky, though, is the fact that you've got both T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase that you have to take care of. So does re-signing T. Higgins signal something to the Ja'Marr Chase camp, things like that? I guess it would depend upon the order of the conversations, right? If Ja'Marr Chase and his representation say, you know what, I can get more money next year, I'm going to do this next year. Then they go and they extend T. Higgins this year. Makes perfect sense. But I'm curious, do you try to engage Ja'Marr Chase first, which then delays your ability, or not your ability, but potentially delays you getting to T. Higgins, which opens the door for CeeDee Lamb to potentially get his extension first? That would be the one big thing. But I could make the case for T. Higgins just based on the quote unquote ease of that contract. I know it's not super easy, but the ease of the contract, especially with a franchise tag number sitting there, and there effectively being a deadline because of that to get that done. You want to get it extended before blah, 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 and all these other pieces. So that would be my one thing with T. Higgins, that there's actually a little bit of a timeline set for it.
Maybe it's because T. Higgins is wide receiver 2 in Cincinnati. I think the contracts that happened that affected him were Jalen Waddle and Devonta
like
Smith,
closer class. For sure.
Those other guys. That's the market Higgins is working with. And if I may speculate, it kind of sounds like the Bengals have said that's okay to this, to that money for wide receiver 2. They don't necessarily want to do that. Maybe they really believe in, the guys they have behind him. I don't know what kind of motion we have. Is Tyler Boyd still in Cincinnati?
No, Tyler Boyd's over in Tennessee now.
He's in Tennessee. That's right.
Yeah. So there's like a drive to get this done, to keep your guys that are proven at least and ready to go. And then, and I think that I would say like a lot of Bengals fans who unfortunately aren't making this decision, but a lot of Bengals fans would say, well, if the Dolphins can pay both their guys, why can't my favorite team pay both those guys? And well, one of the reasons is that one of those teams got their long-term quarterback deal done first, and the other one did it before they got their long-term quarterback deal done. So that's a big part of the mechanism, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think Cincinnati could figure it out if they were motivated to do so. It kind of just doesn't sound like they are. So I don't know if T. Higgins gets T. Higgins could actually like stretch into the season because he still hasn't signed his tag. So or maybe you just stare him in the face and say, you're doing this or you're not playing. And eventually he goes, shoot, I'm missing camp. And if I sit out a year, this could torpedo everything. We've seen so many players lose out on a ton of money because they sat out a year in a contract dispute.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And
as
playing
much
on a
as
franchise tag is always scary.
It's always scary. And I don't like the franchise tag because it puts players in that rock, in that hard place. But I mean, I'm just looking at, for other reasons, but Calvin Ridley, I think he lost money doing this. He's made plenty, but I think he could have made more if he didn't, lose his season to his suspension. I remember the most famous one back in the day was Lev Bell. He sat out basically a whole year. Never regarded as the same guy again.
Yep.
So I would be very, very concerned about that. And I wonder if a tipping point comes where T. Higgins just says, you know what, I'm just going to play on it.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson might be next on that list too. I know it's got nothing to do with the franchise side, but
it wasn't a contract
again.
Thing,
another example of sitting out a year and then trying to come back to the game, and it just being a rough, if nothing else, a rough takeoff from that point, rough runway.
It's like it's hard to simulate football shape without changing your body composition. I think that's part of it too. Even if you work out really hard, you gain a lot of muscle, but now stuff doesn't work the same. And now you got to like find a way to like reclaim that football. It can just be really, really hard to do.
Yeah. Very, very challenging. So we'll see which one of these wideouts is next on the list. But hey, at least Justin Jefferson's deal got done. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at our yike and our like, something we liked, something we didn't like from the week. I'm going to lead us off with just if you're going to compare things, at least compare relevant things. I'll explain what I mean here in just a little bit. We got more coming up for you here on today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It is championship season, hockey, basketball going crazy, also baseball, and you can find NFL futures as well. You can bet on who you think rookie of the year will be, which is essentially which quarterback. Caleb Williams is the leader right there, or defensive player of the year, which is led by Dallas Turner. Or you can go just like lay down a home run prop or whatever else you want. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So find a bet that looks something you're real sure is going to happen and go bet on it. Even if the odds are really short, you still get $150 back in bonus bets, assuming that it wins. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, everybody, continuing on and wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL. And I got to say, if you're going to compare players, at least compare stats that matter. We appreciate you very much for being with us again here today on Locked On NFL. Don't forget to come and check out tomorrow's episode. We are here for you every single Monday through Friday. Tomorrow, we got James and Chris breaking down the biggest questions from around the National Football League. Today, we're going to get into our yike and like, what you do every Tuesday, something we liked, something we didn't like from the week. And Luke, I'll lead us off with a little bit of negativity here. You saw it. I saw it. I'm not gonna specifically reference any person or anything here, but there are people that have been trying to make the claim that CeeDee Lamb might be a better wide receiver than Justin Jefferson, and they used a graphic to compare. I'm not going to mention the website because it's not the website's fault at all, but they used a graphic to compare the two wide receivers, and I think they got overzealous by the number of CeeDee Lamb fields that were green instead of paying attention to what they actually were. This graphic shows CeeDee Lamb playing 6 more games, having more receptions as well than Justin Jefferson, but Justin Jefferson leading in yards per catch and yards as a whole. None of that works in the favor of CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb also playing 6 more games, but I believe only having 2 or 3 more touchdown receptions than Justin Jefferson in his 60 career games so far. All of the other green fields, Luke, 9 of them were either rushing statistics or special team statistics. And I could not say, get out of my face quickly enough. Because if you're going to compare 2 wide receivers and try to say that one is
merchant,
right, and try to say that one is better than the other, let's compare the things that wide receivers do. Like, let's not put Dre Archer and Justin Jefferson in the same conversation, because Dre Archer could line up outside and take a jet sweep for 60 yards because he was super fast. Like, let's not do this. And that's what this felt like to me. So if we're going to compare players, which by the way, I think is futile anyway, I think it's okay to say that like, oh, these players are among the best, this player is the best, but to try to compare 2 different players on what they do, it's typically non-applicable because they're asked to do different things in their different schemes. And that has always kind of gotten on my nerves. And that's why I don't do player comps for draft prospects either. First of all, I think it's an unfair expectation that you're building because what you're saying is not what's being received. It's being received in a very different way. And then the second piece is what Zach Thomas was doing as a linebacker in the 90s, up in the 90s and early 2000s, going with the Miami Dolphins, is not the same thing that you're asking, a linebacker, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., to do in 2024. It's a different position entirely. So let's just not.
It's, I think, important to understand what you're saying when you're trying to make a statistical argument like what you are arguing, because if you compare someone's receiving yards versus comparing their catch percentage, you're saying a different thing. That's just, you're trying to make a different point. I think it's important to think about that stuff. Yeah, I'll start with my negativity as well. My yike goes to the general existence of Caitlin Clark discourse. My goodness. All right. For one, look, I'm not a huge basketball fan. It's a scoreboard sport for me, where you just kind of look up the scores sometimes. And so I'm not going to try to like get in and try to like talk about like which players are like have it or don't. Right. And it's annoying anyways. But a lot of people who found women's basketball for the first time this year in the bracket, which is lovely. We love the exposure, are just like hopping into the WNBA with the same level of numbskull, walnut brained nonsense, brick-headed nonsense, as NBA takes have, and I can't stand it. Look, Caitlin Clark, if you are unfamiliar, she's getting roughed up a whole bunch. There's all these clips of her like kind of taking these hits. For one, she is a notorious trash talker. All right, there is some context here. And for two, yeah, man, welcome to pro ball. That's any transition from college to the pros is going to have that. We see it all the time in the NFL. Looking over at a sport I'm less familiar with and seeing the same thing is like a touchstone for me. Honestly, it's like, oh yeah, okay. Well, welcome to the league. All right, yeah, makes sense. Plus, the WNBA players have built this over decades. Women's basketball didn't just start just because you just found it. So have a little bit of humility and maybe try to learn a thing or two. I think to both of our yikes, try to learn a thing or two before you decide to open your mouth.
Yeah. Really good take. And I'll say too that like Caitlin Clark is not the only WNBA rookie that's getting roughed up. Angel Reese just got taken down like by her neck a couple days ago with a flagrant, and it was like a flagrant one or something like that, but like a flagrant foul. I was like, we glorify all the time the like welcome to the NBA moments, welcome to the NFL moments and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, these are your welcome to the WNBA moments. This has been built for a long time, as you mentioned. All right, I'm going to dive into my like, and I'm going to pivot a little bit because I told Luke what my like was going to be, and I just remembered something, so I'm going to change it. If you want to find what my original like is, come over to Locked On Saints. I'll talk about it tomorrow. But
it's hilarious, by the way. If you're not a Saints fan, you need to listen to it
in full detail. I'll talk about it tomorrow. But my like is the NFL. They heard me. They heard me, man. Somebody sound an alarm, sound a chime somewhere, because they heard me. I complained on this show with what I was told was the boomer take, which wasn't incorrect, Luke. You're absolutely right about that. But I said OTAs suck. Stop calling it that. And the NFL has put forth a proposal.
The Shield.
That's right. Hello, Roger. I have a lot of things to talk to you about. The NFL has put forth a proposal that could mean that as soon as 2025, there will no longer be OTAs, and instead it will just be a longer ramp-up period with an earlier reporting date for training camp, which means we can call things what they are, training camp. And honestly, I dig it. I dig it
for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, it increases a little bit of time off for the players, which I actually have a lot of respect for, and I actually like between the end of season and then when things get started, like fully ramped up and stuff like that. I'm sure there will be some additional reporting dates and everything, class time, like all these other things. But man, I love it, and I hope that they do it. It's not official yet. It's just a proposal, but I love it, and I hope that they do it.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to try to prevent injuries, because the extra ramp up into camp can help your body like acclimate to cutting and stuff at the right
just like angles, you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I actually did a whole segment on it on Locked On Vikings last week. I think it's a really good idea, but the not because of the nomenclature. Like it's
the nomenclature for me, man, and then everything else is the bonus. No, I'm just kidding. It's all good. It's all good.
I want to wrap this out by giving my like to the life and legacy of Larry Allen. Larry Allen passed away on Monday, way too young, and it's so unfortunate what's happening, especially to people who played in the trenches. That's a heavier topic. So right now, I just want to focus on what Larry Allen did. I don't know if there was necessarily a lineman before him that made O-line as fun. There were famous linemen, the guys on the Raiders back in the day, and then like the Hogs, the Washington
Jonathan
Hogs
Ogden.
Yeah. That were interesting groups, but Larry Allen actually like made for a highlight reel. And there's this clip that was going around of John Madden just gushing about this awesome block that he made. And it's just so fun to watch. It makes line play feel like you're watching a wide receiver score a touchdown. It makes it that exciting. Now we get that everywhere, right? You can go turn on any Sunday Night Football broadcast and you'll hear at some point Chris Collinsworth will like hone in on the left tackle on the edge rusher, and wax poetic about it. And I think that rules. But I do think that Larry Allen brought an excitement to offensive line play in the 90s that is just so worth remembering and appreciating. That just rules. To me, that is the legacy that he left on the game, before I grew up and engaged with it. So rest in peace to Larry Allen, and obviously best wishes and everything to his family.
Absolutely. Ditto. What an incredible career. What an incredible life. All right. Well, we appreciate you very much for joining us here on today's episode of Locked On NFL. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports Today, not just the 24/7 stream, but Locked On Sports Today, the show as well, 25 minutes every morning, giving you everything you need to know from the world of sports, all the biggest stories, including Justin Jefferson's extension. So if you want more from Luke, you can go find that there, as well as over at Locked On Vikings. Biggest news of the day. You want more. We appreciate you very much for joining us. For Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on your favorite social media, I'm Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. We'll see you tomorrow here on the show, and Luke and I will see you next week here on Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.